All right, peace, family. First, greetings to everybody in the room.
Peace.
Yeah, peace. Thank y'all for coming out and just hearing me out and starting this, not just a dialogue conversation, but we want to start a plan of action in regards to the solution and at least how I see it and where we can build off of it. And so just, we are on Facebook Live and we'll be recording this for our private YouTube and distribute to our channels. And so I wanted to give everybody a quick background, which I talk about. So, I recently released the solution book, and it's how Africans in America achieve unity, justice, and repair. And I refer to us as Africans in America because our people were African people, and they were left in America. We were property of, or chattel property of, American citizens and the American government, etc. And then we broke our chattel enslavement, but still been left here in America to deal with our own repair, our own fight for justice, and to huddle back up and try to have unity amongst each other. So I don't look at us as African Americans or anything else. I just look at African people who've been left in America. And now we're dealing with the remnants or residuals of what our ancestors have went through and fighting through and what we still go through today. And so the purpose of this book was, just a quick background I talked about in the first chapters, is I've been on socially conscious, awake, aware for the last about 2 years. Prior to that, I was economically conscious in regards to our fight for economic justice, but wasn't much aware of the social and political issues. Didn't have much of a concern for them, as many of us have our time and point in which we become awake and aware. And so, my rise and what I guess what I got on my life journey, my life testimony is that, I grew up, was born to a single mom, 18 years old. My mom literally was on the abortion table when she got up and walked away because my grandfather was forcing her to get an abortion. So I literally was like that, close to not being here. She did have me. My biological father left when I was 3 months old. And then my stepfather came into the picture months later, but he was out on bail for armed robbery and burglary in New Jersey. And so while he started raising me, he then went to prison for like 7 years. And so I knew my father figure back and forth to Rawway prison visiting him and understood those experiences. And he came home from prison with a heroin addiction and was very abusive in our household, to my mother, to me, emotionally abusive. He just had a lot of anger issues. He had a lot of trauma from his upbringing and from his addiction and from what the streets did to him. So I grew up angry and with a lot of trauma as the oldest of 4. And we went through the living at my grandmother's house, 3 of us in 1 bed, and into 6 of us in a 2-bedroom. And then my mom upgraded to a 3-bedroom and 6 of us in a 3-bedroom. And I ended up getting a lot of trouble. Bright as I was, I got a lot of trouble in school, being distracted. Ended up starting to sell drugs at 15 years old. And then dropped out of high school, left home at 16 years old, and hit the streets full time. Would end up going back to high school, to an alternative school the next year, where the bad kids went at 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. in a little bus, and so I went to the bad kids school. Would graduate from high school at that point, but had already started a drug trafficking ring from Harlem, New York to New Jersey to Baltimore, Maryland to Lincoln, Nebraska. I got to Lincoln, Nebraska because after I graduated high school at 17, my biological father, who I only seen twice in my life, when I was 7 and I was 9 years old, he came back to New Jersey to visit from Lincoln, Nebraska, and he had a crack addiction. And so my first interaction meeting my biological father in almost 10 years was me serving him 2 bags for $35, or for $30, excuse me, with an extra deal because of my pops. And that was our first interaction. One of my customers called me and said, your dad's in town. I'm like, and so? Like, he wants something. I'm like, what do you want? He wants 2. I'm like, all right, give him 2 for 30. And that was my first interaction with my father. And he came back to me, high, geeked up, and said, hey son, what you gave me today in New Jersey goes to double in Nebraska. And I was already making triple my money. I was paying 24 grand and getting 100 out of grand. And so he said they're going for 200 in Nebraska. So 2 weeks later, I was on a plane from Newark Airport to Lincoln, Nebraska, so 1998, with 2 ounces of Coke in my side pocket of my Nietzsche shorts, with a white tee on, a blue Yankee fitted, and some Timbs on, with a shoestring around my neck with my safe key and my house key. I remember to the day. My mom, she thinks she was taking me to go rekindle a relationship with my father, but what my mom was doing is she was not taking me to rekindle with my father, she was taking me to go transport. She didn't even know. So I'm giving you all this backstory for a reason. And so I went, made 2 more trips out to Nebraska. My next time I took a first class train with 125 grams this time, and then the next time I kept doubling up every time. I was taking a quarter kilo, 250 grams to Nebraska, I had my train booked from DC to Nebraska. I went to New York to go re-up, and I got locked up that night. The cops illegally searched my vehicle in New York, found a .38 handgun that I had, a .38 revolver, and I tried to run. They caught me, beat me up a little bit, and I had coke all over Riverside and 135th in Harlem, but on the ground. But they recovered most of the drugs, and I went to prison that night. Couldn't bail out because of a policy they have called a surety exam. You got to prove where your bail money comes from. So I was stuck in the Tombs in Manhattan, then on my way to Rikers Island, Mod 3 Upper, C-74, where I was facing 3 years to life in prison as an 18-year-old for my first charge as an adult. They offered me 3 years to life in prison for a nonviolent drug charge. And so I went through that, ended up pleading guilty, serving a year in New York, came home. New York, prison didn't reform you. You just learn how to sell drugs better and get more inspired by other dope dealers. And so I came home on a tangent, went back to my old route, back to Baltimore, back to Nebraska, took over my town in Jersey, made a lot of money, and went through that cycle, ended up catching another drug trafficking charge in Cumberland, Maryland. While I was still on parole in New York. I was out on bail in New Jersey for a small secret indictment charge that I caught. And so I was on bail from a secret indictment, on parole in New York, and they caught a new charge in Maryland. Bailed out from that charge, facing 15 years in prison for drug trafficking, where the cops illegally searched my vehicle in Cumberland, Maryland, and we have an attorney sitting with us. I was able to, I didn't use you at the time, but I was able to actually leverage the fact they illegally searched my vehicle to get them to throw out majority of my charge. So instead of facing and serving 15 years in prison, they downgraded all my drug trafficking charges, employing a minor in drug trafficking crime. I had marked money, having a handgun and drug trafficking crime. They threw all those out and made me plead out to a misdemeanor of possession of a handgun. And so I did 18 months in prison while in Maryland. New York never found out about it. I got off parole in New York while in jail. But while I was out on bail for my Maryland charge, out on bail in my Jersey charge, and on parole in New York, I still had to save up money because I was going to jail. I still had to pay lawyers, so I was still hustling. So here I am, still trafficking, still hustling, still pushing ounces from New Jersey to Maryland and making my routes while out on bail on 2 charges and on parole on a 3rd charge. Went to jail, didn't get reformed, learned better how to be, I thought I figured it out this time. Got taught by some OGs in Maryland on how to position myself better and et cetera, et cetera. Came home from my 18-month stint between Maryland and New Jersey and went on another tangent into hustling. During that time, I learned a little bit about real estate while I was on a parole program in New Jersey called ISP, Intense Supervision Parole. On that program, it was like a men's group like this, where we sat at a church and we just built as men. Like all parolees, everybody got an attitude, we mad as hell, we gotta be up at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. But we started to express ourselves and open up. And during that time, I got frustrated with the program because it was a 6 o'clock curfew. You had to have a journal, you had to have a budget, you had to your breathalyzer test, urine test. It was like super strict parole. And I was so annoyed with it, and our officer was like RoboCop. He'd be popping up at 2 in the morning, a breathalyzer test every morning and question you everything, that I had decided that I was going to actually turn myself in from parole, and I was going to finish my time and come home with no papers. Like that was my plan at 21, 22 years old, was to turn myself in off parole, revoke my freedom, finish my time in jail so I could come home with no parole. And I was actually about to make that decision that week, and during my men's group, our mentor at the time was Pastor Antoine Thomas, a young pastor, he was about my age, about 36 at the time. And he said, listen, Jay, you got a lot of potential. He said, before you decide to go ahead and turn yourself in, I want you to try a job at this mortgage company. My wife's a processor. She works at a mortgage company. I want you to try it out. And I never worked in a mortgage company a day of my life. Like I never had anything to do with a house or refinance. I didn't get none of that crap. And I went into the company. I put some slacks on and a button up. And this wasn't my life, right? I wasn't, I was a street dude. And so I went to the mortgage company. They're showing me the papers. I'm seeing the office environment. They gave me my own little desk in my back room. I was like, okay, so all right, it's cool. And then my grandmother gave me a shot to refinance her house. And I think we made like $3,600 off her refinance. And then my aunt let me refinance her house, made like $2,600. So I made about $6,000 off 2 deals just pushing papers. And I was like, oh shit, this is all right. Like I just made $6,000 legally, like to the good, all profit, without having to dodge no cops, no stick-up kids, no flips, no nothing. And I was like, this is what people do? They actually just push papers and make this kind of money? And so it opened my eyes, and I started pursuing how to fix my own credit, and I learned about FICO scores and secure credit cards and secure loans and 100% financing and stated income loans and just how financing works for houses. and you only need, sometimes 100% financing you can get, and VA loans you get 100%, or you can put 3% down or 10% down, or right. So all these things I didn't know were the myths. Were to buy a house you needed 30, 40, 60, 80 grand. In the hood you just think, hey, that's for them folks. That ain't for us. We just the tenants. And so that opened my eyes up to the opportunities in real estate. But it wasn't a happy ending story then. I got off parole, went back to the streets, started hustling again because I was used to faster, quicker money. Didn't want to discipline myself to work in that company, and hustled for a few more years where I, had 2 federal investigations of my team that, we skated by. Ended up having another close call where police again illegally searched our vehicle, and there was a queen who was transporting some work for me, and she got caught with a lot of work. And we beat her charge completely because they legally searched her car, but was able to get off. And I lost a lot of money, and that was, while I was doing selling my coke. And so I stopped trafficking, stopped selling coke, and decided to switch my hustle and sell dope. Started selling heroin in Newark. So that was my cure to my drug route getting busted, was to switch my hustle and go into Newark and sell dope on 10th and Springfield in Newark and 100th and Avon, which was the home base for, I think at the time, was the Sex Money Murder Bloods. So I partnered with one of the Blood gang members. He was the muscle, I had the product, I was the connect, and we started selling heroin. And then one day, approaching 25 years old, I'm like, damn, here I am about to be 25, and I was questioning myself where I was gonna be when I was 30. And I could not picture the win I used to picture. When I was 17 and I was selling drugs, and I'm sitting on 100 grand at 17, 18, 19 years old, and got people working for my older cousins who used to beat me up, they working for me now. My uncles who used to give me spankings, they getting high now. I'm serving my uncles, serving my pops, just committed to that world. But I believed I could make it though. I really believed in my heart that I could beat the streets. I thought I was smart enough and I was equipped enough to do it. And at 25, after all I've been through, I couldn't see the win no more. I could not picture myself winning. I only could picture myself dead or in jail. And I even tried to reimagine it, to try to force myself to picture the win, and I only could see myself dead or in jail. And so that day I did what few do in that game, and I walked away. I actually broke my trap phone, smashed it on the ground, gave the rest of my drugs away. I didn't say I'm about to finish up, then I'm done. I actually gave away product to the rest of my partners and said, yo, y'all finish this out, that's y'all. I'm about to try this real estate thing full time. Okay, because I asked myself and challenged myself to see, was I a drug dealer or was I a hustler? Because a drug dealer can only sell drugs. A hustler could sell anything. So I was asking myself, Jay, are you a drug dealer or are you a hustler? I was like, no, I'm a hustler, I can sell anything. So I was like, all right, so what would happen if I put all this talent, all this charisma, all this work ethic, all this grind into real estate full time? I never tried anything full time other than selling dope since I was 16, 17. Once I left, I had hoop dreams. I was playing ball. I had the top scoring average in New Jersey, top 10 for a period of time. But once my hoop dreams fell away, only thing I ever put energy into was selling dope. So I said, if I take that energy out and I put it into real estate, what would happen? And I went into the industry, I made closed one deal in 9 months, made $2,500. It was about to give up after 9 months of grinding it out, going to work 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, driving a 93 Mercury Grand Marquis to the office with the driver's side door handle missing. I had to stick my finger in the door hole to open my door. My glove compartment was held together with a shoestring. I used to listen to Young Jeezy, Thug Motivation on a portable DVD player. I didn't have a CD player. I had a portable DVD player, listening to Young Jeezy, Thug Motivation on the way to work every morning, learning mortgages, learning real estate. I got my real estate license, got my first 2-family, then a single family, then my first, So it's a long story, and even how I broke in to making money in real estate. I paid off my mom's foreclosure. My mom was in foreclosure because my father had a heroin addiction, so all the money went out of the household. And my mom had an FHA home that she owned. We had it for 2 years. I gave her $3,000 as a down payment for it. She got it for $100,000. And a couple years later, it was going to foreclosure, behind on taxes. So I sold my Navigator, got the little hoopty, and paid my mom's tax lien off for foreclosure. And she promised to, hit me off when she sold, which I didn't even care about. I was just taking care of mom. So there's no point in me to ride around in a luxury car with my mom in foreclosure. That's corny to me. And so anyway, when we did pay our foreclosure off, we found out the house had appreciated in value $100,000 in 2 to 3 years. She bought it for $100,000, but when we appraised it, it was worth $189,000, $190,000. So we sold the house, made 90-something thousand. My mom gave me $33,000. I went and flipped that $33,000 and got a bird with it. And that's what actually, that was the work that Queen got caught with that when they searched her car. But that's just where I was committed to the game, and the story's gonna round up to why we're sitting here. So I'm just saying it's layers and layers and layers within the story, but anyway, I walked away from the game, got into real estate, grinded my butt off, was broke, borrowing money from folks, was ready to go back into the streets because I wasn't making enough money fast enough. And the month that I was gonna go back to the streets, I mean, I literally was making phone calls to find out what prices were. And that month, I closed 7 deals and made $13,000. And the next month I made $30,000. And then the next month my pipeline all started hitting. And like 4 or 5 months later I made $90,000. And then from then I never looked back. I made my first million within 3 years in the industry. And so that brought me into real estate and showed me the economic opportunity and options that lie within our community, even for those who come from what we come from. That's why I tell you my backstory. Those who come from single moms, who come from drug addiction, who come from abuse, who come from high school dropout, who come from felonies, who come from prison. I done lived all of that. Is the whole point why I told you the story like that. And I think God gave me that journey and that testimony to be able to sit here and relate to so many. Like, I've done lived that. I've been up and made millions and blown it all, filed bankruptcy, got it all back, built a whole new brand company, ran 3 multi-million-dollar companies, all with no college education. And I sit here in Midtown Atlanta in this boardroom, able to run a decently successful real estate development company, an education company, a real estate fund, our community involvement, all from being self-taught, just going through the ropes, doing what we do, being resilient, being resourceful, and figuring it out. And that's what I started my community activism in Newark, New Jersey on the economic side with my program Young Minds Can, because I believe young minds can do anything. We just need options, we need mentorship, we need hope, we need opportunity. We need to feel like somebody looks like me can do it besides ball and rap, right? And so we started our mentorship program, and that's when I started J. Morrison Academy to mentor others on all what I learned in real estate development, investment, wealth education, all the secrets, the ins and the outs. And that led me to, as I had success in real estate, you know, I've been a real estate expert on the Today Show. I've had a show on NBC as a guest celebrity realtor called Open House NYC. I did over 9 episodes. I've had celebrity clients from Deshaun Jackson to Angela Yee to others. We've had Young Jeezy donate $1 million to our school. I've had all the celebrity associations and validations and cosigns, and you know, amongst others. But all that led me to a moment where a few years ago in Las Vegas, I was speaking at a real estate conference in Las Vegas. And I'm just there being celebrity realtor Jay Morrison in Las Vegas. And while we were on lunch break, and I mentioned this in Solution Book, a queen ran up on me at lunch and said, Jay, my name's Amelia Wright, and my brother is Alfred Wright, and he was lynched in Hempfield, Texas. So I don't know if you heard about the story. I was like, yeah. Coincidentally, 2 days prior to me going to Vegas, I was on my couch in my condo in Jersey, and I saw Anderson Cooper on CNN covering a story about Alfred Wright, who was found in the woods naked, with his throat slit, eyes gouged out, teeth missing, ear cut off, found dead in the woods, and they were calling it a suicide. And I was like, yo, I had chills in my body, literally had tears on my couch. And coincidentally, I go to a real estate conference in Las Vegas and run into his sister, who asked me to lend my celebrity influence, any relationships I got, any voice, to support their family. I had never protested, I had never done any activism outside of economic education to that point. Everything I did, I went to high schools, I taught my Hip Hop to Homeowners program, I did home buyer workshops, right? I did all economic education for our community, but I never got involved with social or political activism. But God had a tugging on my heart, and the fact that, the coincidence, right? Because I don't know if you ever read the book Celestine Prophecy, everyone should. It was a Celestine moment. The energy was like, how coincidental am I on the couch watching CNN, just chilling, and seeing this story that gave me chills, and I run into his sister. So I felt called and activated into action, which happens to most of us. Most people become conscious and aware because something happened that provoked something in you to take action. And so I flew to Jasper or Hempfield, Texas, went to Houston. Well, actually, I went to Houston, Texas, and I drove 2 or 3 hours to Jasper, Texas, in the boonies in Texas, Redneck Central, and where we did a community panel, and some others came out to support their family in this case of this injustice, right? Because they truly believed, and we truly believed that it was a murder. It was not a suicide. He didn't cut his own throat and cut his own ear off and pull his own teeth out, right? He was lynched because his woman was a white woman, and the sheriffs in town, their son, were drug dealers. They sold meth and other things, and whatever he was involved in, he ended up being murdered. They said he pulled up to a gas station, they have it on camera, and all of a sudden at the gas station he just runs and darts into the woods for some reason. And they find him days later, but after the family had asked to search the area around the woods, the sheriffs blocked it off and said they were not allowed to search this particular acreage, this particular area. So it's private property. And guess where he was found? in those same woods days later. And so it was all these question marks about the case. But anyway, we protested, and when we went to protest, my first activism, we're driving in a town, and the new Black Panther Party was there, and they had shotguns and AKs, and they strapped, and the sheriffs got their big redneck hats, and the KKKs out there, and all this is out in Texas. And it's the first time I ever seen Black power, where I seen Black people actually stand up, strong, back erected, speaking truth, face to face with our oppressor. And I was like, yo, this shit is dope. Count me in. And that was my social triggering moment. Because when you come from the inner city, or you come from a lot of the areas we come from, like up in Jersey and New York, you don't see that. You don't really see anybody really standing up for us to that degree. Or at least I wasn't involved in it because I was so busy trying to get money. As a lot of times, the money is a distraction. When I was just getting my bread and just developing real estate and just going to the club and driving my Range Rover or seeing what new chain I could get or new watch I could get or what queen I could run down, you just distracted, not even seeing what's going on, what's really going on in the community. So once I had that opportunity to see the inside of what goes on and people that really dedicate their lives and their freedom to our safety, to our unity, to our justice, I was like, as a Black man, I feel compelled. I gotta be a part of this. Like, I seen my stepdad pulled out of our vehicle when I was 9 years old for a warrant that the police had for him that wasn't even him, was the wrong person. And because he resisted to getting arrested, because it wasn't him, they fought him and beat him up and had police brutality, but then locked him up and he did 3 years in prison for resisting arrest. So I seen that as a youth, watched it out the back window of our car while my mom was just simply doing a paper route. That's how she fed the family, with a newspaper route. And my stepdad was with us slinging papers out the car to houses and got pulled over for a faulty warrant and ended up going to jail for 3 years. So this is the kind of trauma that we face in our community because of how we're oppressed, because of biased policing, biased sentencing, and biased policies. That's a large part of our trauma. So anyway, after the Alfred Wright case, Sister Crystal Muhammad from the New Black Panther Party, their chairwoman, she gave me all this information about our oppression. And quite honestly, I didn't believe it. I'm like, nah, they ain't do all this. COINTELPRO and vacancy tactics and peonage and how all these laws tied to our oppression. I didn't believe it at first until I went home and I Googled and researched it all for myself. Then I read about the laws, I read about the Moore family bonding and Tulsa, Oklahoma bombing, and I really got the details for myself. And that's why in this book, The Solution, before we even get to the first chapter, there's like 3 strong pages of strong bullet points of fact disclosure. What I found is that most of us just don't know. We're just given a basic European American education of our history, and that's what we accept as our history. There's no easy way for our youth, millennials, and the mass of us to find out what we've really been through. And so I marked that out in the book, and I call it fact disclosure. So then I had the next level of my consciousness and my awakening was Sister Crystal. We started building then, back and forth, and I went back out to Hemphill again, and we talked, and they invited me to a retreat in Mississippi. And so here I am, come from New Jersey to Mississippi, and I'm like, I'm not going to Mississippi. Right? I committed to it. I'm like, I'm not going. I asked where we're staying some trailer homes, and I'm like, I'm not going to stay in no trailer home. I stay at 4-star hotels at least, And so I was getting my bougie stuff, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go. So I went to Mississippi coincidentally, and it was with the New Black Panther Party and some other freedom fighters, and there was the president of NCOBRA. NCOBRA is the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. The president of NCOBRA was there, some other elders were there. And so during this retreat, we did yoga, we did agriculture, we did farming, we did handgun training, we did martial arts, and we did a lot of history and studies. And so I had the 2 conversations I had, which I talk about in this book as well, is one, I forgot the elder's name, but he had a whole dialogue with me about my viewpoint, my paradigm, and how I see the world. And so he was asking me, like, what are you? Are you African or are you African American? I'm African American. He said, boy, you African. I said, no, I'm not. He said, that's a problem, you think white. I said, what you mean I think white? I'm offended. What you mean I think white? You think like a white boy. That's what he told me, you think like a white boy. He said, I don't blame you though, because you were brought up in a system that taught you to think like a white boy or a European American. And so he said, you have to realize, and that's what part we're going to talk about here, and I have it in this book, is the mindset shift. What happened for me is when I'm a very logical, I'm a very linear, analytical person. And so when it clicked in my head that, oh snap, I am African first. If my grandma's grandma's grandma was African, that makes me what? African. If your grandma's grandma's grandma was Russian, that makes you what?
Russian.
If your grandma's grandma's grandma was Mexican, that makes you what?
Mexican.
So why do they want to make us African? Especially, we say, oh, we don't know what country in Africa. Well, obviously we went through a very unique situation called the transatlantic slave trade. So many of us don't know what countries or regions or origins or tribes that we come from. But we do know what continent, what area in which we come from. I actually did my test. I know I'm from Benin and Togo. But nevertheless, the point is, once I had that mindset shift that outside of everything, I'm African first. So it's my responsibility to take care of my people first. Like, if you ever hear me speak, I don't knock no other nationality. I'm not one of those people. I'm just very intentional about empowering our people, my people, because our house is burning. So before I get to anyone else's house or go to the community committee to have to worry about the whole block, I got to worry about my immediate house that's burning, which is our community. And so I had that awakening, and I got a chance, coincidentally again, that I got locked out of our house on this retreat. And Baba Joe, who's the president of NCOBRA, had to come back and let me in. And so Brother Kamal and Baba Joe and I got to talk for 14 hours straight. And I picked their brain like a mug, boy. I went in. Like, why we ain't got reparations? Why this? Why that? And so I got the answers to those things. And so then I immediately go into real estate developer mode. If you give me a piece of land, if you give me a rundown house, you give me the shittiest house on the block, it might be the house I want. But I'm going to diagnose it, I'm going to look at its value, I'm going to look at its repair costs, its acquisition costs, I'm going to see if it fits my formula, if it makes sense, we're rolling with it. I always go into the solution mode, is a long story short. In any business, in any venture, any relationship, I'm always looking at, what's the solution? All right, cool, I hear all the problems, cool. Now, what's our solution? How do we repair it, right? That's what I do, I repair for a living. And so, in doing that, what he told me is two really important things that we're going to talk about today. One is, he said, when I asked him this big case for reparation, right, or justice, or restitution, or repair aid, I said, well, why don't we have it? He said, well, listen, we've been fighting this for 40, 50 years. And he said, we done been to Supreme Court, we done been to all kind of courts. And he said, what they said is our case is very similar to the Japanese Americans. If you guys don't know, Japanese Americans were put in internment camps for 2 years during World War II. Because America was so scared that when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and we were fighting Japan, that Japanese Americans would rise up and fight us. So America rounded up all the Japanese Americans and put them in internment camps, right? Without even them committing crimes, just to be safe, they put them in camps. Because of that 2 years of rounding them up, they paid out their descendants reparations for years. Those similar to the German Jews who got paid reparation, similar to the Native Americans who got paid reparation, who were considered domestic citizens or domestic partners, or whatever that term is called, domestic nation. So I asked Baba Joe, well, if everyone else got reparations or repair, you know, why not us? And that's fine. Yeah, we do have queens in the building. There's nothing wrong with us being, yep, nothing wrong with that. Yep. Now, as formal as it is, it's still a family conversation, and we're going to make sure we take care of our queens. And so, so him telling me that, basically, this is what the president of NCOBRA told me, who's been working on reparations for 40, 50 years. He said the reason why we don't have reparations is because what the Supreme Court and what the courts have ruled is because African American is not a nationality. African American is not recognized by courts as a legitimate nationality. That's why we can talk about all the injustices and all the human rights violations. They're never going to do anything for us. And they're so tired with it. What he says, I don't even care about what they do for us. We need to do for self. That's what he's like, I'm done with the fight. And so that's a big part of the solution, is self-repair. This is not about what someone owes us and not about what someone can do for us, about what we can do for ourselves. But nevertheless, if you owe me, you still owe me. If you owe me $10, you're not giving me $9. So we still gonna get ours, but we're still gonna take care of self also, right? So what he said was, so I said, okay, if African American is not considered a nationality, and that's what's holding us back from restitution, reparation, repair aid, and justice, then how do we become a nationality? He said, well, World Court statute says that a critical mass of people must acknowledge themselves, raise their hand, and say they're a people. They do so by way of what's called a plebiscite, which is a public vote. And if those people do a public vote and formalize themselves and acknowledge themselves as a people, and they get acknowledged by another sovereign nation in the world who's part of the World Court. That sovereign rights violations to the World Court, and we can have a seat at the World Court as an observer. If we were to first establish and acknowledge ourselves as one people of like circumstance. And that's how you actually formalize and become a legitimate nation. And you piggyback someone else's sovereign nation status, and then you can go to World Court, and we can bring these cases of racial terrorism, as the United Nations have recently called it, that Africans in America suffer racial terrorism at the hands of America. We can bring that to court for justice, right? So when it boils down to the solution, as I elaborate in the book, I'm just giving you guys a backstory because we have more content we got to beat in our people's heads, and why I'm asking you to be here. What we found is that if we are sophisticated and civilized enough and organized enough to conduct a Black Vote Day and to actually bring our leaders out, and I elaborate if in the book I spell out what a Black Day looks like. I need to remember what page it's on, but I want to talk about that. A Black Vote Day. That Black Vote Day, we've already been in talks with, it's in chapter 1, excuse me. We've already been in talks, it's right here actually. So the way I want to talk about Black Vote Day and then what's next. I'm actually maybe even illustrated on the board behind me. But what it boils down to is this. Here, before I get to Black Vote Day, here's the synopsis of the solution. The solution is that, and Malcolm said it best, and I'm going to make sure everybody has copies of this book before you leave here. Whether you decide to purchase or not, doesn't matter. I want to make sure everyone gets it. So what Malcolm talked about, and there's a heavy Malcolm influence in his book, what Malcolm talked about and what our elders have talked about, and I'm not saying anything new that Elijah Muhammad hasn't said, Mr. Farrakhan has said, Malcolm hasn't said, Marcus Garvey hasn't said, so I'm not pretending to reinvent the wheel here. I'm just rolling the wheel forward and using my influence platform and my strategic thinking and critical thinking skills and the business skills that have allowed me to create something pretty special for myself coming out of the environment which I come out of.